Dean Legge Show for the day of. For July 14th, 2014, the first day of SEC Media Days. We did a bunch of questions beforehand, before SEC Media Days. I'll touch on a little bit of the first day today. Question from URT08, who has not gotten a lot of posts on this site, but he asks, or he or she asks, I have a personal feeling that Jeremy Pruitt will have the defense tightened down by the second half of the year. If the Dogs slip past South Carolina and start 6-0, what do you think the odds are that they can run the table during the regular season, given how the momentum train can get going those types of dream seasons and even average players start playing well above their talent level? I think they definitely, if they were 6-0, the shot of them going undefeated is pretty good. The issue, though, is that, you know, the last undefeated team in the SEC was Auburn in 2010. So LSU went undefeated in 2011, but lost obviously to Alabama in the national championship game. So you can do it, but the last couple of years have shown not just that the division champions are vulnerable, but they actually lose games. So will Georgia get to 6-0? I mean, the reality is probably not. But, you know, if they do get to 6-0, I think that would mean Florida or somebody would be right after that. You know, then those games starting to get pretty big. I think Florida's going to be a little bit better than a lot of people think. I don't think they're going to win the East. I think that Georgia wins that game. I think that Florida will play okay, probably beat somebody like South Carolina in Gainesville. But if Georgia were to get rolling, of course, they could definitely go to an 11-1 season. But the point isn't necessarily the regular season, is to get to Atlanta, which I think Georgia will do this year. If they can get to Atlanta, they're in a one-game scenario to play into the first four big playoff game. UGA Dog Forever 08 asks, how long do you see Jeremy Pruitt sticking around Athens? That's a good question. I don't think he's going to be here for long. I think he'll be in Athens maybe 3 years, 4 at the most. I don't even know if I can see 4 years. I think Jeremy Pruitt would like to be a head coach somewhere, preferably in the SEC. But, you know, people were worried about Todd Grantham leaving after the 2011 season as well. So you can't get ahead of yourself. Let's see what Jeremy Pruitt does on the field before we get too nutty about what he is and what he is not. Payne Hall asks, and by the way, I'm just reading these questions right off the top. I haven't even read what's been going on. How do you see the carries shaking out after Gurley gets his 15 to 20 a game? I'm thinking the freshmen are too talented to just assign the rest to Marshall. I think that's probably true, but I do think I had a discussion with an insider today, and they think that Keith Marshall could be faster than he was in the past. We'll see about that. The speed isn't a thing for Keith Marshall. It really seems to me like it's a balance thing. But, you know, Keith is a heck of a player. And I think that Keith's going to get, I would think, anywhere from 8 to 12 snaps. And then guys like Sony Michel, if Nick Chubb and Sony both play, you know, there's only so many footballs to go around. But it doesn't have to be by game. I mean, there can be games where Todd doesn't need to play. There could be games where he's hurt. There could be games where Keith is hurt. So if I had to guess, you know, you've got one of the best running backs in the last decade at Georgia, 20 years at Georgia, and probably one of the best running backs in the SEC in the last 5 to 10 years as well. You want to use him as much as possible. My guess is that those guys, Sony Michel, etc., they'll get the ball some. I don't know how much. I would think you want to try maybe 6 carries a game for the freshmen. I think Georgia's going to run the ball a lot. And I think if they feel like they've got 2 to 3 running backs, they could run the ball 45 times a game and not have a problem with it. I mean, if they got 60, let's just say they have 70 snaps, that number could reach 50. I mean, I don't think they want to rely on Hudson Mason to win the ball game when you've got someone as skilled as Todd Gurley. Next question from Payne Hall. Other than the running backs and Blazevich, what other freshmen are likely to see time on the offensive side? I definitely think that Isaiah Wynn, who is a lineman from Florida, I definitely think he's going to play. I don't know if he's going to start, but I definitely think he's not going to start probably, but I definitely think he's going to play on the interior of this offensive line. Could he start? He could start. He could, Brendan Kublano is the guy that seems like a starter right now, but hasn't totally nailed it down. Greg Pike hasn't nailed it down either yet, but I think Greg is further along than Brandon because he's been in the program longer. So I think if there's a competition, it might be at left guard. But there are moving parts on the offensive line. The long story short, I think Isaiah Wynn is a guy who definitely will play this coming season. Payne Hall, again, have special teams issues from last year been dealt with? Special teams experience appear to be a requirement for at least one new defensive assistant. I assume Colin Barber, being a scholarship player, will get every opportunity to win the punting job. Who will snap for kicks? I'm not worried about Marshall Morgan at this point. Okay, that's a kind of a long-winded question. I wouldn't be concerned about Marshall Morgan either. I think he's in good shape. It looks like Nathan Theus is going to be the snapper. I think he is the better of the snappers, but he was not consistent at the beginning of the season last year. That caused some real issues. I assume Colin Barber will get a chance to win the job as well, but I don't know if he's going to win it. I've heard very little about the punting situation. So I think they're okay with Adam Erickson, who played a punter last year. Forgive me if that was not who it was, but I'm pretty certain it was him. And I think they're okay if Barber isn't the guy. They just want more consistency. You went from Drew Butler, who was one of the better punters really in Georgia's history, which sounds crazy, but it's true. He's an All-American. And Georgia hadn't had a ton of All-American punters. Jonathan Kilgo was probably the best punter of the Mark Richt era outside of, when Drew Butler could really lace into it. So I don't know about punter. I think that is one spot you gotta watch. And have the special teams issues been dealt with from last year? I don't think we know the answer to that, and I think that we won't know the answer to that until the first problem comes. If there's a problem in the fourth game and not the first game, we'll know that they have been dealt with to some degree. But you got to look at the special teams. They did get a little bit better as time went on. You could lean on Marshall Morgan. He was consistently good. And the disasters that were the Clemson game, the North Texas game, those weren't as bad. But, then you look at the Nebraska game and the Kentucky game with muffed punts. Special teams really shouldn't be that decisive against you. You should break even. There was a time when Georgia was very good at special teams. Good teams have a way of being good at special teams. I don't know if they're there yet, but I don't think it will be the adventure it was last year, which I think will show some improvement. Again, Payne Hall. Will we see further offensive deviation from the scheme that Coach Richt brought with him from Miami via Florida State to Georgia, and which remains the Bulldog-based offense? I haven't taken the time to go through each game last year, but I would guess Georgia was in the S package, which is 3 wide receivers, more than 50% of the snaps. Hudson would be even good with 4 wides, which I think is true. Fullback seems to be going away, which I also think is true at Georgia. And Payne Hall goes on to say it creates a good opportunity for a walk-on with a strong neck and a hard head to get some playing time. I think we're going to see Hudson try to go as fast as possible if he can, which is going to mean 3 receivers on the field at the same time most of the time. I think the tight end may be the spot that kind of doesn't get any play this year compared to what it is or was in the past. But you look at Georgia's weapons, there's a lot of them. You've got, I would say in order, running back, receivers, quarterback, tight end. And I think, that's what you're looking at. I think there's a reason why Quavon Hicks is going to be the H-back tight end in some formation. There's a reason why you want to get Jay Rome on the field for what he does. But listen, the running back is special position. If Keith Marshall was the starting running back, you'd be very comfortable with him because he'd probably get 900 yards in a season, and that's a successful running back in the SEC. But, Keith is coming back, Justin Scott Wesley, Malcolm Mitchell, you've got Michael Bennett. what happens if Jonathan Rump's light comes on? So there, that's not even mentioning Chris Conley. So the strength of the team is the ability to catch the ball, and that includes Todd Gurley. If you go back and look at how productive he was without the ball being handed to him last year, Todd was special as a receiver. Just ask the Gators, Georgia Tech, and Auburn. He beat those three up pretty bad receiving the ball. So I think they're going to try to get the ball out of Hudson's hands into playmakers' hands. That goes without saying because he's a quarterback, but at the same time, they're going to try to hurt you with the pass. It is going to be a little bit... When Mark came to Georgia, they tried to go hurry up, and the SEC officials basically wouldn't let them. I think we saw in the Gator Bowl that Hudson wanted to go faster. Maybe it wasn't hurry up, but Hudson wanted to go faster than they were allowing him to go, whether that was the officials or the weather or whatever. But I think they're going to be quicker this year. And we've seen Georgia be fast in the past. I mean, they zipped up and down the field on Georgia Tech playing hurry up. When they could smell blood at the beginning of that Tech game, they just went fast. So that's what I look for. We'll see if that continues. Can you review the staff in the recruiting office at some point? How many are there? How many will be added? What exactly does each staff member do? That's kind of a long-winded thing that I'll probably need to write about rather than anything else. Dog 3155-8. I hope that's your zip code because otherwise that's a heck of a number. Got to ask where you see J.J. Green playing, just special teams or used on defense too. Watch Camden play a lot. J.J. Green is a very good football player. He's very good for what size he is. For me, in a perfect world, J.J. Green would not be playing defense. He is not very tall. He has been beaten up a little bit in SEC play as a running back, which happens, obviously. I would use him on special teams as much as possible. When I watched him play for Camden, he was a very good person in the open field with the ball in his hands, and that happened a fair amount for Camden on special teams plays. I think if Georgia had their way, he wouldn't be playing, starting on defense. We'll see if he's a starter on defense. I don't think that will happen, but we'll see. But for me, I would do special teams with JJ as much as possible because I don't think he's special, in terms of a special teams player like, I don't know, Damian Gary was, or even to the level of Thomas Flowers, but he could get close to Thomas Flowers, and I think that would be helpful in the punt game. Last year, he just had to play running back. It was just too much. So I think JJ's a good football player, and Georgia needs more football players, and I think that the problem with football players is they don't always have positions, and so JJ now is going to play no less than 2 positions in 2 years at Georgia. That's asking a lot. He didn't even redshirt. He's not huge. So, let's see if he can be Mikey Henderson or something like that. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing, that's not a slight to JJ at all. I just know from what I saw when he was at Camden and what I saw, he's not an SEC running back, okay? Not for me. And I think that he was put there because he got there early, and then they had some real issues, okay, when 2 of your best running backs are gone and you have no depth. Isaiah Crowell wasn't there. So that's why JJ was, playing running back. Should have never happened. But I think with JJ, you take him and you put him on special teams and you see what he can do. And if he's a nickel guy, you throw him out there too. I just don't think he's going to be a starting safety in the SEC. We'll see. Jeremy Pruitt showed you getting paid $850,000 or $750,000. It's a lot more than I make. He'll figure it out. Blythe Dog says, have you heard anything about A.J. Turman? How do you think he will contribute this year? I've not heard tons about A.J. Turman. I think he's in the same ballpark as Brendan Douglas. We'll see. Do I think he'll contribute this year? Not in a major way. Swanee Dog 03. Swanee Dog must be like the Dean Legge show question leader, at least in the clubhouse. Do other schools have systems similar to the Paul Oliver network? Paul Oliver played at Georgia and committed suicide in this past offseason. Sad, very sad. Paul was a great kid when he was at Georgia. My interactions with Paul, I like Paul. And that really hurt a lot of people that happened like that, because you want to feel like you could have done something to help. Do other schools have systems similar to that? I don't know. But, you're never going to play football forever. I don't care who you are. And the vast majority of people in the world have to learn to live life after college, life after athletics. I mean, all of us. I mean, those of us that played sports in college, you stop playing. And if that's what you've identified yourself as for so long, that's hard to get past. I know that when I was 12 or 13 or 14 or whenever it was, I started playing sports seemingly seriously. I played sports seriously through college for 10 years. And that's a long time, because you identify that as being what you are, part of what you are. It's not who you are, and it shouldn't define everything that you are. But as soon as you don't play anymore, life is a little bit different, because you're not used to not practicing. Why are you gaining weight? Where are the fans? Why does no one, why am I not part of a team anymore? And why isn't everybody in my organization trying to get through one goal? Why are there political, why is this person not for me and me for them? And I think if you played in the NFL, leaving the NFL, if you're in the NFL, it just extends it for a few more years, and it makes it sometimes that more difficult to get used to not playing anymore. So I don't know if other schools have it, but I do think that a lot of the conversations I have with guys that I covered in the early 2000s at Georgia, not everybody's in sports. And even if you are in sports, it's different when you're not playing anymore. And life goes on, and sometimes guys are really good at dealing with athletics, but they're not really good at dealing with life. And I think that part of what Mark has tried to do here is to make sure that he's not losing track of people. And that's important. I think it really is. The goal of the football program at the University of Georgia is to win every game they play and to graduate every kid they sign. But that doesn't happen all the time. And even if you do win every single game and you do graduate every single kid, doesn't the University of Georgia have a duty to take care of, or to stay in touch with, or to help guide even the guys that they have built buildings on the backs of? And I think they do. So that's my take on it, is that the alumni should take care of the school, and the school should try to take care of some of its most vulnerable alums, even if those guys played football or golf, for whatever it is. What are my expectations for Dog Night? Swanee Dog 03 asks, how many commitments? Do you have a list of all notable attendees? My Dog Night guess now would be 1.5 would be the over-under. The high mark was 5 a few years ago. We will have the list on Dog Post of what you should be expecting for attendees. I know that Trenton Thompson will be there, continuing the cycle that he will likely sign with Georgia. At least that's what it looks like right now. I have no reason to think he won't. So that's my expectations for Dog Night, is that Georgia is a little bit more organized this year as it relates to, they're not going to get 500 kids at once for this event, thankfully. 200's a lot, but 500 last year, it was crazy. Swanee Dogs, last question here. I am really intrigued by Josh Sweat, sorry, and not trying to get my hopes up since he's most likely a long shot in the end. He seems like he sure could be a first rounder. Do you think Georgia has a legitimate shot? I think they have a shot, but I think that we're a long way from the finish line, and I think that Virginia Tech is going to be the leader going into the fall, and that Georgia did well on the visit, as it should, but I guess I'm more skeptical. Georgia hasn't signed a legitimate kid from, that Jordan Love was probably the last kid from Virginia, and he wasn't a 5-star, world beater. So I think that this is sort of like Trenton Thompson saying, I'm interested in USC. That's where it is right now. I think what you do is you watch what the kids do, not what they say. Lorenzo Carter was in Athens 5 of the 7 home games or whatever it was last year. Certainly 4 or 5 games he went to. You could tell it was going to be tough to beat Georgia. So that's what I would watch, is not what kids say, it's what they do. JM Toldog, who also asked a lot of questions in these. Here are a few questions for you. Am I surprised with Nick Marshall's run-in with law enforcement? Feel free to use that question as a prompt to expand on Marshall and Auburn. I'm not surprised by that, but I don't think that... I think Auburn has a lot of pressure to in-state, to win as much as possible, and sometimes to win at all costs. They have more pressure than a lot of SEC schools. Them and Auburn are like, they just can't stay away from each other, and they try to constantly one-up each other. It's very unhealthy, actually. And I think that Auburn, if it were me, I don't know what the right answer is as far as Nick and media days is concerned. If it were me, I probably would have brought him because it kills the story right there. And now we got to see how long. I mean, for me, you suspend the kid for a game. You're going to beat Arkansas anyway, games at home. You suspend the kid. Again, Paul Oliver Network. Nick is going to have to live life after football. I mean, I don't think he's going to play as a quarterback in the NFL for very long, if at all. As a corner, he could play for a while. But the point is, at some point, his football days are going to be over. And if you're Nick and you are an outstanding basketball player, an outstanding football player, someday soon, the music's going to be over and there's no chair left to sit in. And what is Nick's life going to be like when that day comes? And I say that out of actual concern for Nick, because this is not the first time he's had a problem. And if it's alleged that Gus Malzahn is trying to help Nick, then Nick is still making mistakes, and that's just all there is to it. I mean, you can't smoke weed. You can't have weed on you, this, that, or the other. You've already been kicked out of one school. So the question is he learned any lessons? And it seems to me like right this second, he's learned some lessons, but he's not learned them all. And you got to understand, if you're the quarterback at Auburn, you get arrested or you get a ticket. If you get a ticket, it's going to be reported speeding ticket likely. Anything that's not, basic run-of-the-mill chewing bubble gum while walking on the sidewalk or something like that, it's going to be front page. This is with an illegal narcotic. I mean, or drug. You can't have it. It's illegal. And so I think if it were me, I'd suspend him a game, and I would have released that already. I would have brought him to the media days. I'd have suspended him a game, and that would have been like, hey, we're dealing with it right now. We're not dealing with it again if I were Auburn. But, they have professional, they have public relations professionals at Auburn, and those guys get paid to do their job. It looks like, that's the way Auburn's going to handle it. Auburn still could suspend him for a game, but, we don't know what Auburn knows. Can Georgia's defense absorb an injury to Ramik Wilson or Marlo Herrera, or are things really bleak at inside linebacker after those two guys? Would you say their health is vital to our chances this season? Do you think Bing Dukes is one of the first guys off the bench. I think Reggie Carter is the first guy off the bench, and I think Tim Kimbrough is right after him at inside linebacker. I do not think it's Bleak at inside linebacker. I just don't think that those guys are as good as Ramik or Amarlo right now, just the way that Amarlo and Ramik were not as good as Alec Ogletree at the time. So I think that what we're going to see is Georgia's got a little bit, that front seven is pretty nasty. Ramik definitely helps that. Amarlo's not a slouch either. He's just not as kind of freakish athletically, but he's very driven and passionate. I love Amarlo Herrera, man. I think he's great. And I think that he's important. I think he's important. I think David Andrews is important. I think Corey Moore is important. Not that those guys are high-level NFL prospects, but those guys have been committed to Georgia for a long time, before signing day or just right around signing day the year before they came to Georgia. So now those guys have all played 4 years, and it's been, amongst those three, it's been a mixed bag. I mean, Amarlo has started for the better part of 3 years. David has started for the better part of 3 years. Corey started about half a year or a year. So, but those guys are important to the program, and they're the reason, they'll be a lot of the reason why Georgia succeeds or fails this year, is if those guys can keep everybody on the path that they got to go. And, Ramik, I don't know Ramik very well because he didn't grow up in Georgia, but you can't, it's going to be tough to replace a guy that led the conference in tackles, but that hasn't happened. So, we'll see. I think though it'd be Kimbrough and Reggie Carter. I think Reggie Carter's pretty good. He started a game last year, by the way. Is Jay Room fully healthy? Do you like Jordan Davis or Jeb Blazevich to win the number 2 tight end spot? I would think it would be Jordan Davis, but I don't know, because Blazevich has really raised some eyebrows in the summer this year. So that's a good question. Is Jay Room fully healthy? I think he'll be back. I don't know if he's fully healthy, but I think he'll be back for the start of the season against Clemson. So Jay didn't have that injuries really sidetracked him last year for sure. JM Tall Dogs, last question, and the last question for the night is over under 2.5 class of 2015 commitments at Dog Night. I would say under that, because I said it at 1.5. But, it's Dog Night. It's a major event in the South in terms of recruiting. So I think that it certainly could be 5, but I doubt it. I think Georgia's in on a lot of pretty good guys. They've really recruited well this year. But Dog Night hasn't necessarily been about commitments since the 2011 Dog Night that had Derek, Bryce Ramsey, Stanley Williams, etc., Tormel, so Chester Brown was a couple of days after that. So that was a pretty big night. I think what you could see is guys not committing on that night, but maybe a week after that saying, you know what, I think I want to go to Georgia. The curious thing would be, do they get a commitment from a quarterback, 2015, 2016 quarterback? That's what to watch for. Now, I legitimately do not know that will or will not happen. I'm just saying that's the curious thing to watch, because we're at that stage where 2016 guys are, particularly quarterbacks, are paying attention to what's going on. Okay, this has been the Dean Legge Show on Dog Post. Check out dogpost.com for all of the SEC Media Days, Dog Night, and even UGA Day coverage this week. And then stay tuned in August. We're going to have a lot of good deals. If you have not picked up a subscription to Dog Post, you should. The magazine that is going to the press here pretty soon is big, bad, full of color, and some killer photography too, if I do say so myself. So go check out dogpost.com. Dean Legge signing off.